Hello. My name is Tamaga Ryuji. I'm going to thank you for having me as a speaker today. And I'm going to talk about site reliability engineering, which become famous from a book written by Googlers. So, small self-introduction. I'm working for a company called Sky, which is at Shin Osaka, and recently maybe famous for a product called Sky Sea Client View, which has an advertisement with Fujiwara Tatsuya, a famous actor. Also, I'm working as a freelance translator, mostly for O'Reilly Japan. O'Reilly is, famous technical book publisher. These are the small list of the books I've translated. And I'm also working, recently I'm working for GitHub as a translator. I'm translating official documentation for GitHub. So these are the books I've translated. I have translated 30 books, almost 30 books. And one of the book I want to recommend you is Healthy Programmer, which is about the health of you as a programmer. Most programmer tends to stay and for long hours, and it is not very good for your health. And this book is about how to keep your healthy while working as a programmer. So this is a nice book for you when you want to work as a programmer for long period of time. Okay. So these are the books I'm going to publish soon. The one is Designing Data-Intensive Applications, which is about distributed databases. The very good textbooks for learning about distributed systems. The next one is the Site Reliability Workbook. This is the second book from O'Reilly and Googlers about site reliability engineering. Now I'm translating this book, and this is also a very nice book. And when this is published, please take a look at the bookstores. Today, you're able to read English books. So the Site Reliability Workbook is published as a free PDF. So if you want to read this book soon, you can access O'Reilly's site and find the PDF. Okay. So this is today's talk. The SRE book is published, and there is a big movement started in Japan. And what is the site reliability engineer? And site reliability engineering focus on the velocity and reliability. And one of the big thing in SRE is decision making based on data. So I'm going to talk about that, and about the technologies described in the book. And also I'm going to talk about the engineer's career and hiring, and some small talks from the things I've learned from working with Google SRE. So here's a disclaimer. Today I'm going to talk about things I've learned from the translating this book, and the things I'm going to talk is the excerpt from the SRE book. And I'm working as a software engineer for Sky, but I'm not working as a SRE. So the today talk is not from my own experience. But the story behind the SRE and the SRE book and the problems that SRE aims to solve is very popular, common to the software engineers. So I believe that from the talk I'm going to present, you can, there is a lot of takeaways from today's talk and SRE book. And please feel free to ask any questions if you have questions anytime. Okay. So first, the SRE book is published and what happened in Japan. This is a cover of the SRE book, the SRE book. And here is some recommendation from the famous people. And they say that the Google employees have shared processes they have taken, including missteps, and have a Google service to expand to both massive scale and great reliability, and so on. This book was published in 2016, and it was very big hit in the engineering market. So when the book was published, some engineers in Japan also read the book, and they started established the SRE teams. The famous ones, for example, Mercari and Smart News and Cybos. They started the SRE team by learning the SRE book. So this list is until the 2016, and there are lots of more companies which have the SRE teams. And in Japanese version of the book, we changed the subtitle. The original book has the subtitle as How Google Runs Production Systems. But from reading the books, I wanted to change the subtitles to in Japanese, Google の信頼性を支える engineering team, the engineering team that supports Google's reliability. So I think one thing important is that this book is not about mostly not about the technologies, but about how they run the team, to how they manage the team to support the reliability. And this is sorry, this is Japanese, and this is word from the reviewers. I think this is a very good introduction of the book, and this says that this book is not only for big companies like Google. The contents of the books can be applied to any scale of the organizations, from small startups to the large enterprise, or for a person running his or her own services. And also the SRE is basically operation people, but there are lots of takeaways for the software developers who acquires the perspective of SRE. Okay. So the key of the book is the team management than technologies. So this book is about the reasons why Google can deploy highly reliable service very fast. And for Google Books, the people may think that the reason is super technology in Google, but at least about this book, that is not true. Partly true, but the Google super infrastructure is only one of the reasons. The biggest reason for the Google can deploy highly reliable service is that SRE's principle and steady improvements based on the principle. Yes, there are a lot of things to learn from this book, and those can be applied to everybody's daily work. And these are the table of contents of the books, and there are red ones and the black ones. The black ones are about mostly about the technologies, and the red one about team management. So you can see the almost half of the contents about how to run the teams. So I also wanted to focus on the team management side of this book. Okay, so what is the site reliability engineering? This is excerpt from the book. The SRE is what happens when you ask a software engineer to design an operation teams. So this is a sentence written by the founder of the SRE team, and he was working as a software engineer and started the operation team in Google. And you know, the infrastructure of the Google is software driven. And operation work is mostly human centric or very manual labor, but software can change the way the operation teams work. So as he says, software SRE is what happens when you ask a software engineer to design an operation team. So role or team of the site reliability engineer. The diagram is here. And basically, SRE is operations role. But SRE works as an engineer. In Google's case, the hiring team of the Google requires skills as 80% from 80% to 90% of programming skill is required for people who acquired as SRE. So they are almost have the skills as programmers too. And also, of course, they have to know about the infrastructures. And they have the two types of work. One of is the operation work, like on-call or writing post-mortems, or usually daily operation work. And also, they have the engineering projects for improvements. This project is very specific to SREs. the writing softwares to improve the reliability of the services. And this diagram shows the way of the teams, how to create, allocate the teams to services. Each service has the dedicated development team, and most services has the also assigned SRE teams, which is made by at least 3 or 4 people. And the SRE is the corporate-wide team, and they knows very well about Google's infrastructure, how to use the Google's infrastructure from the services. And development teams hires the engineers, but the engineers may not know the good way to use the infrastructure. So SRE is like a bridge from the infrastructure to the service development team. So SRE team shares the knowledge about Google's infrastructure, but they also have the assigned as small teams to each services. Here is SRE's principles. SRE's S stands for R stands for reliability. So they focus on reliability. And they automate the operations by software engineering and let it scale. In the very basic level, the operations are manual labor, but they use software to automate the manual labors. And beyond that, they make the service autonomous. The service detects the troubles by themselves and fix the problems by themselves. That is autonomous services. And one of the important things is that SRE team size should not be scaled directly with the service growth. For example, first, the service has the 1,000 users, and SREs have, for example, 3 people. And when the service grows to have the 10,000 people, the SRE team should not grow by 10 times. They say that the size should not be affected by the size of the scale of the service, but the complexity of the service can affect the size of the SRE team. And another principle is elimination of toil. I'm going to talk about toil later, but this is very strong principle. While working with Google SRE as a translator, they are very they want to eliminate the toils. So, and another thing is that don't depend on the heroic efforts. So I think the traditional Japanese companies depends on the heroic effort, but Google's SRE doesn't depend on the such kind of efforts, but building a healthy team to solve the problems. So this is about the toil. The toil is a kind of work tied to running production services that tend to be manual, repetitive, automatable, and tactical, and devoid of engineering value. and scales linearly as service grows. So toil is not very interesting work you do when running services. The manual means yes, it is not automated, but you you do things by your hands each time. The repetitive means that you repeatedly does same things as working for services. And automatable means that what you do can be done by softwares. By writing softwares to do same things, you can be free from the toils. No enduring value means that by doing such toils that there are no long-running values. It means it has short-term, only have short-term effect. And ON with service growth means that toys when your service grows, the toys grows linearly with the growth of the services. So the existence of toil means that SRE team should grow with the service growth, but they don't want to be like that. So eliminating toil is very important for the SREs. So for example, there is a stories from the in the SRE book, and for example, service activity monitoring. You can monitor servers activities by hand, installing the monitoring software and using the console and watching the monitors. But that can be automated. So by automating the generation and collection and aggregation of the metrics, you can be free from the toils. And what is important is that making the time for the eliminating toils. So there is a 50% rule in Google SRE, which is I'm going to talk about later. They make the time for development work for automation project. And in Google, all servers have the metric collection framework built in. So the value of CPU load or traffic or number of requests can be acquired by HTTP. So based on the framework, the SRE builds a monitoring and alerting systems. So this is very good. It is a very ideal environment for engineers to create monitoring systems. But what is important is that even Google, the perfect system cannot be built from the scratch. In the SRE book, they wrote the stories that they steadily improve their systems. Yes, step by step, they create metric collection systems, and based on that, they create monitoring systems and alerting systems, and improve the systems step by step. So we may think that Google has very fantastic systems from the start, but it is not true. So they create the systems from the scratch, step by step. And what is important is that that is enabled by creating the organizational rules that enables the, such engineering work continuously. They have the internal rules to make the SREs work for such project. The next topic is velocity and reliability and decision making based on data. So SRE's focus is in velocity and reliability. The velocity means rate of the deploying new product or functions. So also reliability means SLO, service level objectives. I'm going to talk about this later. And one of the key things that SRE try to solve is that tension between development team and operations team. May be if you are working as a developer or operation engineer, you may know that the development team wants to deploy or release new functions to attract your users. But the operation team wants systems to be stable. So they may not like to deploy new functions or product often. So here is the tension between the two teams. And so developers tend to focus on velocity, and the operation team focus on reliability. They are they have the tensions to be solved. So in Google's case, they make rules based on measured data. The two famous rules are error budget and 50% rules. These are very catchy terms when talking about the SRE, and but this is Google's case, and when we are using the SRE's principles, there may be another kind of rules, but I think here's important is that definition of data that represent the quality of the services, and measure that data, and making decisions, business decisions based on the measured data. And here is the definition of the terms SLI and SLO and SLA. The SLI is a service level indicator, the definitions of data to be measured. Usually SLI is like availability. But in Google, the service wants to be completely unavailable because there is many data centers, and if one of the data centers has a fault, the traffic will be transferred to another data center. So SLIs cannot be availability. So the SLIs are like successful requests per total request. And the SLO is very important, and service level objectives. There are the objectives defined using SLIs for internal engineering use. So you may know that there are lots of SLAs, service level agreement, when using the, for example, cloud services. SLAs are contact with customers But the SLO is internal objective for engineering use. So the SLO is working towards meeting the SLOs of the services. So, for example, the SLOs would be defined like 99.999% of the successful requests per total request. So this is a relation between SLO and error budget. Error budget equal 1 minus SLOs. Usually data is measured quarterly in Google. So the key is that as long as error budget is left, the new functions can be released. This is decision making. So, and if you have many troubles for services, the error budget would be exhausted. And when error budget is exhausted or seems to be exhausted soon, the release of new functions are disabled. Of course, the emergency case like security patches are accepted. But if the development team wants to release new functions, because the error budget is exhausted, they have to focus on the reliability, and they shouldn't release the new functions. So this is one of the case example of establishing rules to make decisions based on data. The development team and the SR team will be work to in same directions. And what is interesting is that in the book they claim clearly that 100% reliability cannot be a target. This is about services on the internet. So this is the story is different. For example, the nuclear power plants or the medical devices. But in case of consumer services, the difference between 99.99% and 0.99999% won't be distinguishable by users. So you may use the, for example, the services with your smartphones, but smartphones has the its own problems, and there may be communication problems. So the 0.009% difference is distinguishable by users. Then the cost of making availability slightly better would not make any return. So the SLO is SLO makes this thing clear. The SLO should be defined by the importance or criticality of the services. So to define SLO based on the service character is very important. So yes, here is an excerpt from the book that Google doesn't discuss the reliability concerns that face software intended for nuclear power plants, aircraft, or medical equipment, or other safety critical systems. So I've heard from the Google SRE that they use they have lots of times to define the SLOs based on the services characters. Also, another important rule is 50% rules. there is a rule in Google SRE team that SRE must spend more than 50% of working hours for engineering product. This means that also means that the usual operation work tends to drive the engineers for example, burning out. So they have to work for creative project for at least 50% of working hours. So when SRE spends more than 50% of working hours of office work, which means there is a lot of problems in services, the development team have to help the SRE team until operation work hours become under 50%. This is also the case of the definition of the data and business decision making based on the data, and drive development team and the SRE team to the same direction. So the development team have to make their services reliable for avoiding work to help SRE team, and so this is the one of the important rules. Okay, so stories about technologies. I already said that this book is not about the magical technologies. The story of the book is very simple. The SRE is improving things step by step. So you know that Google has very strong infrastructures, but they don't have a big role in this book. The stories can be useful without Google's infrastructure. So we can learn from the SRE stories, especially we are working in a software controller world. So the one of the stories in the book is building mechanism for measurement and improvement, acquiring metrics from the infrastructure and creating monitoring or alerting systems. So the story is very simple, and when we are working with infrastructures that is software controller, for example, writing by a simple Python script, we can do the same kind of things. So we should try that kind of improvements or automations. So the automation is one of the important aspects of the SREs. When it's possible, they automate things. They say that the benefit of the automating is compoundly interesting. Automate something saves time, and by using the saved time for another automation makes another time, and so on. So the making manual labors to automation and autonomous makes your life better. So one of the things I learned from the book is that great result, like the autonomous MySQL migration from a server to another server, is from the bird's eyes, it is very great result. But they are not made by one great step. they are made by small accumulation of small improvements by of the usual technologies, the technologies you use in your daily work, like shell script. Okay, so here's the engineer's career stories, and as I said, that the SRE is required for requires the skills of Google's developer. 80% from 80% to 90% of Google developer skills and knowledge of the infrastructures. But it is difficult for to find candidates. There is not enough candidates for the SREs. So these days, Google SRE start to create the libraries with knowledge. And by asking development teams to use that libraries, they can save the SREs to be assigned to the development teams. And as for the career of the SREs, the one of the big milestone is being on call. On call is the members who deal with travelers. So I think the one of the big difference between the usual Japanese companies and Google SRE is how to educate the SREs toward on-calls. They have the very clear path to be on-call from reviewing document and post-mortems and shadowing the on-call and to the on-calls. This is the except from the SRE book, and the anti-patterns like brute force. This is not good ways, and recommended patterns has a very clear path to be to educate the engineers to the on-calls. And there is a incident response training in Google. There is a corporate-wise training once a year, and what is important is that accept that things that we do occasionally cannot be learned. We tend to try to do things by that we do occasionally, but the rates we do things if the rates we do things to is too low, we forget the things. So there is a instant response steps. Making them to daily tasks is important. Okay, so here's time. So this is a small stories the SRE's work when I learned with translation. The SRE reviewers use Google Docs very heavily, and they are. I think they are doing the usual documentation work with smallest toys. So they are very good at using the Office tools, Google Docs, and there are unavoidable manual works, but they know that how to do such things efficiently with appropriate tools. So that is one of the expression of SRE's principle. Yes. And also, this is the last page of the presentation, and my way of translation has changed. One of the impressive things was the evolution of online applications, Google Docs or Dropbox, and I've translated over 500 pages book with all with the online applications. So, and also smartphone is very useful for the reviews. Also, Google SREs use these tools very efficiently. So, okay. So, thanks for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Tamagawa-san. Thank you very much. We have a few minutes for questions. So, if somebody wants to ask a question, I can hand you the microphone.
Good morning. I'd just like to ask you, so taking the principles of what an SRE does, how do you use those at Rakuten on a day-to-day basis? Just maybe a simple example if you could. Can you hear me? Okay, I apologize. So taking the basic principles of what an SRE does, can I just ask you maybe for a very simple, maybe daily example of how you would use those principles at Rakuten? Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I came in a little late, so that's why
Okay. I'm working as a software engineer for a different company, and yes, I learned from this book that by eliminating toil is very important, and these days there are lots of things that can be automated by writing small scripts, and I'm driving the writing small scripts to automate the small things to save the times from daily works.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Anybody? I have a question, Tamagawa-san. As you work with O'Reilly, do you have an idea how they choose their image for the illustration of the book? Sometimes it's like a butterfly or I don't know. Do you know how they choose these illustrations?
I'm sorry?
The illustration of the O'Reilly books, you know, SRE book has an animal on for illustration. Do you know how they choose it?
Once I asked the editors how they choose illustration, but it completely depends on the choice of the designers.
Ah, the designer. Okay, okay. And I have a last question. What is the most difficult to do when you are translating a book from Japanese to English? What's the most difficult thing?
From Japanese to English?
I mean, I guess you translate from Japanese to English, right?
No. From English to Japanese.
From English to Japanese. Okay, what's the most difficult thing?
I'm working as a translator with the mostly with the reviewers.
Okay.
And reviewers has their policies for Japanese sentences or choice of the words. And the coordination between the reviewers are most difficult part of the translation.
Okay, thank you. Please let's say thank you to Tamagawa-san. Thank you very much. It was very helpful.